ladies and gentlemen. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that no matter how much you give, how kind you are, how available, how understanding, you're still not respected the way you crave to be. Now ask yourself, why does that happen? Because deep down, respect isn't given to the most agreeable. It's earned by those who know where the line is drawn and dare to defend it. Picture a man with no boundaries. He bends, breaks, and bleeds for approval, yet slowly disappears into the background of his own life. But the man who defines his edges, who says no without guilt and yes with purpose, becomes a presence that demands notice, not just attention. You ever wonder why some men walk into a room and silence follows not fear but gravity? In this speech, we're diving into 5 invisible lines that, once drawn, shift the balance of power not through dominance but clarity. And trust me, number 5, it will challenge every belief you've been told about what women really want from you. So don't blink, don't scroll, because this isn't just about being respected, it's about becoming unforgettable. Saying no without explaining yourself is one of the most powerful forms of self-respect a man can embody. It's simple in theory, yet deeply confronting in practice. Most men have been conditioned by family, by society, by culture to believe that their worth is tied to how agreeable and accommodating they are. From a young age, many boys are taught that to be liked, they must please, to be respected, they must yield, and to be loved, they must prove themselves over and over again by being endlessly available. But what if the opposite is true? What if constantly saying yes, especially when it compromises your own needs, time, or dignity, slowly erodes the very respect you're working so hard to gain? When you say no, especially without a follow-up explanation, it sends a subtle but powerful message. I trust myself. I value my time. I don't owe anyone access to me simply because they want it. That doesn't mean being rude or dismissive. It means that you're not performing for approval. It means you're not afraid of disappointing someone in order to remain in integrity with yourself. And ironically, it's in that exact moment when you disappoint others to honor your truth that people, especially women, begin to respect you on a deeper level. Because real respect isn't born from compliance. It's born from clarity. The need to explain ourselves often comes from fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood or unloved. So we soften our no with long reasons, trying to justify our boundaries as if they need permission to exist. But every explanation chips away at the strength of the boundary itself. When you say no and then feel the urge to over-explain, what you're really doing is apologizing for having a standard. And if you keep apologizing for your standards, they become invisible. If you keep justifying your no, eventually your yes starts to mean nothing. Women sense this. They feel it. They test it. Not consciously always, but instinctively. When a man cannot hold his ground, when he avoids the tension that comes with saying no, he becomes forgettable, not because he lacks kindness, but because he lacks conviction. There's a common belief that women don't like rejection or that they prefer agreeable men, but that's not entirely accurate. Women may not enjoy being told no, but they deeply respect a man who knows when to say it and does so with quiet confidence. Why? Because it shows leadership, it shows discipline. It shows that he's not afraid to lose favor in order to stand in his truth. And in a world where many people seek constant validation, a man who doesn't need to be liked in every moment is rare. That rarity commands attention. It draws curiosity. It creates polarity, and polarity creates attraction. Now some might argue, but isn't it polite to give a reason? And sure, sometimes a short, respectful explanation is fine. But if you find yourself habitually explaining every no, especially to avoid discomfort, then it's not about politeness, it's about approval seeking. The moment your no becomes a performance to protect someone else's feelings at the cost of your own clarity, you've given your power away. And once given, that power is hard to reclaim. What starts as small compromises, agreeing to plans you didn't want, staying in conversations that drain you, pretending to be okay with things you're not, eventually leads to a life that feels out of your control. Think about the last time you said yes when you wanted to say no. How did it feel in your body? Heavy? Frustrating? Quietly resentful? Now think about a time when you firmly said no and walked away. There might have been tension, maybe even guilt, but was there also relief, a quiet pride? That's the feeling of alignment. That's the emotional proof that saying no, even without a detailed explanation, is an act of self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of being respected by others. Women don't want a man who avoids tension. They want a man who can hold tension, who can look them in the eye and say no without flinching, without fear, without begging to be liked afterward. This kind of man is rare because he's not trying to win approval. He already has his own. And from that place of self-assuredness, his words carry more weight. His boundaries feel more solid. His presence becomes something people notice even if they don't understand why. This doesn't mean you become cold or closed off. It means you choose intentionality over approval. It means that instead of defaulting to yes out of fear, you pause and ask yourself, do I truly want this, or am I just trying to be liked? That pause, that space between the ask and your response is where your power lies. And every time you protect that space, every time you give yourself permission to say no without justification, you reinforce the message that your life is not up for negotiation. Your time, your values, your emotional energy, they're yours to manage, not to be borrowed or bargained away. Time is the only asset you can never earn back once it's spent, and yet it's the one most people give away freely, often without realizing the cost. Imagine walking around with a bag of money, handing out bills to anyone who asks, no questions asked, no expectations in return. You'd be broke in days. But that's exactly what happens when you allow people unrestricted access to your time. And if you're not protective of your time, people, whether consciously or not, will take it for granted. Women especially notice this. They're not necessarily trying to waste your time, but they are deeply attuned to how much you value it. If you're always available, always responsive, always on call, you send a clear message. Your time doesn't matter as much as theirs. And over time, that kills respect. Think about it, people respect what's scarce. We value gold because it's rare, not because it's shiny. When your time is overly abundant, constantly offered without boundaries, it loses its perceived value. But when you protect it, when you schedule it, when you say, I can't do that right now, you begin to radiate a sense of discipline and self-worth that commands attention. Women are drawn to men who are mission-focused, not men who drop everything at the first text. Because a man who guards his time is a man who likely guards his purpose, his energy, and his standards. He's not easy to access, not because he's playing games, but because he's living intentionally. The challenge is that most men are afraid of appearing selfish or unavailable. They've been taught that being a good guy means being endlessly reachable, always accommodating. But being accessible to everyone all the time is not kindness, it's a lack of structure. And structure is attractive. Structure means stability. It means you're not flailing through life reacting to every request, every demand, every emotional tug. It means you have a plan, and that plan matters more than momentary approval. When you treat your time like currency, you start asking better questions. Is this conversation worth 30 minutes of my life? Is this meeting moving me towards something meaningful? Is this relationship platonic, romantic, or professional, helping me grow, or just keeping me occupied? These aren't selfish questions, they're strategic. Because every yes is also a no to something else, your goals, your health, your peace of mind. If you say yes to every request that comes your way, you eventually say no to yourself. And once you abandon your own priorities, people, whether they mean to or not, will follow your lead and begin to deprioritize you too. A woman can admire a man who's generous, but she will respect a man who's principled. Generosity without boundaries quickly turns into servitude. But principles make people think twice before asking for your time. They force others to consider whether what they're bringing to the table is actually worth your attention. When a man is unavailable without guilt, when he schedules his time with the same seriousness he'd treat a financial investment, he becomes someone others don't just want to be around, they feel lucky to access. There's also a deeper layer here. When you don't value your time, you teach people that you don't value yourself. And if you don't value yourself, how can anyone else? A man who protects his time doesn't need to say, I respect myself. It shows in how he answers calls, in when he chooses to reply to a message, in how he handles distractions. He's not reactive, he's deliberate. He's not cold, but he's not needy. He doesn't abandon his schedule for every whim or favor because he's building something. And that building, the work, the vision, the discipline becomes the very thing that commands admiration. People might push back when you start to set time boundaries. They'll call you distant, detached, too focused. Let them. It's a test. It always is. When you begin to protect your time, some people will resist because they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries. But the right people, the ones who genuinely respect you, will adjust. They'll start valuing your time more precisely because you do. You'll find that conversations become more meaningful, relationships become more balanced, and those who stay in your life will rise to the standard you've set. What's surprising is that when you start guarding your time, you often gain more of it. Not just hours on a clock, but clarity, energy, focus. Suddenly, you're not drained by people who only reach out when they need something. You're not lost in endless texting loops or last-minute plans that hijack your day. You move with purpose. You rest with intention. And in that space of control, something powerful happens. You become the kind of man people respect, not because you try to impress them, but because you refuse to betray yourself. Emotional manipulation is one of the most insidious forms of control because it's often disguised as love, care, or concern. At first glance, it might look like someone simply trying to help you or express their feelings, but beneath the surface, it's a strategy to get you to behave in a way that benefits them. It's subtle and it's dangerous. The difficulty with emotional manipulation is that it doesn't always come with a clear no or stop. It's not as obvious as someone yelling at you or being outright aggressive. Instead, it creeps in through guilt, passive aggression, emotional blackmail, or the silent treatment. To refuse emotional manipulation is not just about recognizing it when it happens, but also having the strength to act on that recognition. This is where most men falter. They don't want to seem cold or uncaring, so they allow themselves to be emotionally swayed by someone else's needs, even when it's detrimental to their own mental well-being. They feel guilty for not giving in, for not responding to someone's emotional requests. But here's the truth. Emotional manipulation is never about someone else's well-being, it's about controlling you. When you fall prey to it, you're not helping anyone. You're merely enabling a toxic cycle. The first step in refusing emotional manipulation is to recognize it, and that's often harder than it seems. Manipulation works because it plays on your emotions, your guilt, your fear of conflict, or your desire to be liked. It's the person who acts hurt when you don't immediately drop everything for them, the one who gives you the silent treatment until you apologize, or the one who says, "If you really loved me, you would." These tactics put you in a position where you feel like you owe them something, even when you don't. You're not being asked for your thoughts or your help, you're being asked for your submission to their emotional whims. This subtle form of control often gets confused with love or affection. People in relationships, especially romantic ones, will often act like their emotional needs should always come first. But love does not mean sacrificing your emotional health to cater to someone else's. True love and respect exist when both parties are allowed to set boundaries without guilt. If someone uses your love for them as a weapon to get what they want, it's not love, it's manipulation. When you recognize this, the next step is to practice refusing these manipulations without guilt. You'll face resistance and you'll feel discomfort. You'll feel bad, perhaps, for not responding in the way someone expects, but this is where the growth happens. It's crucial to remember that you are not responsible for other people's emotions. You cannot control how they feel about your decisions, and you certainly should not be bending your will to appease someone else's emotional state. When you refuse to let someone manipulate you emotionally, you make a powerful statement. I am not here to meet every need you have at the expense of my own. One of the most challenging aspects of refusing emotional manipulation is understanding that it's not about the other person's feelings, it's about your own boundaries. You don't need to be rude or dismissive, but you also don't need to explain yourself endlessly. "No, I can't do that for you right now" is enough. You don't have to apologize for your decision. It's important to be firm in your stance because if you don't, you'll send the message that it's okay to override your needs and desires just to maintain peace. In the long run, this damages both you and the relationship. You'll end up feeling resentful and exhausted, and they will continue to expect that kind of unrelenting compliance. Refusing emotional manipulation requires immense self-respect and awareness. The key is to stop seeing manipulation as an isolated incident or a moment of weakness in someone else. It's a pattern. Manipulators don't just ask for something once and leave it alone. They probe and test. They'll push until they find a crack in your boundaries, and then they'll use that crack to wedge open more access to your emotional energy. The moment you allow one small manipulation to slide, it becomes a gateway to larger ones. And before you know it, you're stuck in a cycle of giving, apologizing, and never feeling truly at ease in your relationships. It's also crucial to understand that refusing manipulation doesn't make you a bad person. You're not abandoning someone or hurting them, you're simply choosing to take control of your emotional state and your life. It's an act of self-preservation. It's a statement that you will not sacrifice your mental or emotional health for the comfort of others. And paradoxically, this self-respect is what commands the highest level of respect in return. Women in particular are drawn to men who can say no without guilt, who can stand firm in their beliefs, and who refuse to be swayed by emotional pressures. It's not about being selfish, it's about knowing your worth. Ultimately, refusing emotional manipulation isn't just a tool for protecting your peace, it's a sign of maturity and strength. It's an indicator that you're no longer willing to play games with your well-being. And when you stop letting others emotionally control you, you'll find that you have more room to grow, to love, and to be loved in a healthy, respectful way. Setting standards for how you want to be spoken to is one of the most critical aspects of maintaining your self-respect and ensuring that others treat you with the dignity you deserve. It's easy to think that respect in a conversation is automatically given, but more often than not, it has to be demanded not in an aggressive or controlling way, but through clear boundaries and expectations. The words people use to address you, the tone they adopt, and the manner in which they communicate are reflections of how they view you. And if you tolerate disrespectful language or dismissive tones, you're sending the message that you are okay with being treated that way. The challenge here is that many men don't set these boundaries early enough, often because they want to avoid confrontation, keep the peace, or be perceived as easygoing. They allow people, especially those they care about, to speak to them in ways that feel off, uncomfortable, or even hurtful, believing that silence is a form of kindness. But silence in the face of disrespect only enables more of it. It's the subtle things like passive-aggressive remarks, sarcastic tones, or condescending comments that erode the foundation of respect in any relationship. And the longer you let it slide, the harder it becomes to enforce your standards later on. The key is to recognize early on what feels wrong and to set the tone for how you should be spoken to, ensuring that people understand your boundaries without question. Setting these standards starts with knowing what you will and won't accept. How do you want to be spoken to? Do you want to be treated like an equal, or do you expect to be addressed with authority and consideration? It's important to know your own values and what you stand for, because this will shape how you expect to be treated. If you want to be treated with respect, you need to communicate it clearly through your actions and, when necessary, through words. You don't have to tolerate raised voices, insults, or passive-aggressive behavior. You don't have to endure conversations where you feel belittled or dismissed. Establishing standards for how you're spoken to is about respecting yourself enough to walk away or demand a change when someone crosses those lines. The process of setting these standards isn't just about enforcing them with others, it's about being self-aware and knowing your own worth. You cannot expect others to treat you with respect if you don't first respect yourself enough to draw those lines. Self-respect means understanding that your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being are not things to be casually disregarded by anyone regardless of their relationship to you. And this doesn't just apply to women. It applies to everyone. If you let someone speak to you in a way that diminishes your value, you're teaching them that it's okay to do so. People will treat you as you allow them to, and when you don't set those standards, you open the door for others to cross lines they wouldn't normally cross if you had been more firm with them from the start. One of the most effective ways to set standards for how you want to be spoken to is by modeling the behavior you expect from others. This means being mindful of how you speak to others as well. You set the tone. If you communicate respectfully, calmly, and with clarity, you're more likely to receive the same treatment in return. People often mirror the energy they receive. If you show up to conversations with kindness and clarity, others are more likely to respond with the same. But if you enter into interactions with defensiveness, frustration, or impatience, you set the stage for others to do the same. It's about creating a culture of mutual respect where everyone involved understands that words matter, tones matter, and intentions matter. When you set these standards, you also create an environment where communication flows more smoothly. People will begin to understand that they cannot manipulate the conversation or use language that makes you uncomfortable. They'll know that if they speak to you in a demeaning way or try to manipulate your feelings, you will call it out, and not in a way that invites drama, but in a way that maintains the peace and integrity of the relationship. You don't have to tolerate heated arguments or conversations that make you feel small. If someone speaks to you with disrespect, you simply need to address it with calm authority. I don't appreciate being spoken to in that way. Let's try to speak to each other with more respect. Setting standards also means understanding when it's time to walk away. Sometimes people won't adjust their tone or words despite your attempts to set boundaries. In these situations, you may need to exit the conversation or even the relationship if it's clear that the other person is unwilling to speak to you in a way that honors you. Walking away isn't about giving up. It's about maintaining your self-respect and refusing to let anyone diminish your worth. You don't have to tolerate a relationship that continually violates your standards. You are the one who holds the power to decide what's acceptable and what's not, and that power is not to be taken lightly. At the heart of setting standards for how you want to be spoken to is the idea that you have control over your own narrative. You are not a passive participant in how others treat you, you are an active participant in shaping those interactions. When you demand respect in your conversations, when you set a firm standard for how you expect to be treated, you become a force that commands respect naturally. You no longer have to beg for it, explain it, or justify it. It's understood. And in that space, you open the door for deeper, more meaningful relationships where mutual respect is the foundation, not the exception.